Hello everybody. I hope you're doing well today. Let me know if anything doesn't seem to be working well, and then we'll harass Justin to tell me how to fix it. So, I hope you're here ready to see some paints that you may not have seen before, because I got some goodies from Reaper sent to me today, even, like they arrived today. So I had to redo some things, so I've got some Reaper paints, and some more Reaper paints, but some of those were samples in the first thing. So I don't have all the paints, but you're going to get a sample of some things, because they weren't finished pumping all the paints. They're still mixing and pumping them, because it takes a while to make that much paint. So I guess I should get started. I'm going to start with, I got a few samples, so I'm just going to start with a couple of those. Let me switch my views. I'm going to start with some samples to give people some time to show up, and also explain what samples are, because there's always a lot of questions about that. So this is the swatch sheet for the Reaper virtual colors, and I think that these are still, actually I'll turn on my other light. I think that these are still in the web store, at least some of these are. So if any of these look really cool, I did another swatch stream on my own before Reaper Virtual Expo. So I've had a little bit of practice doing this. And so you can see the bottom row are all metallic, so they look much cooler on a video than they look in, you know, just in my photos, because I have photos of this up too. And then these are the new sheets that I've prepared for fun today, but I'm just going to swatch some of the samples on here. So let's see, it looks like there's a new sample label, so that's kind of fun. And then this is like the original label. Let me see what other colors I had. I think some of these are, I'll explain the origin of samples, but I think some of these are a slightly different reason for samples. So I'm going to start with this white one, which may or may not look like anything since this is white paper, but we'll find out. I'll zoom in a little. Maybe zoom in a little more even. That might be too much. I'll pick it up and make sure you guys see the details. I just need some space to move my paper around too. Hello everyone. I see Michael's here, and Valander, and David Weir, and Green Users, Julie and Bob. Hi everyone. Thanks for coming out and supporting me. So, I don't even, this might be a metallic. I don't know. So what are sample paints? Why do you get them? Why can't you get more later if you really love a sample paint? So there's kind of two main components to paint. Yeah, this is very exciting, this white on white paint here. So the first component, if you think of paint kind of like you're making stew. So the first component is your stock. So you might have chicken stock or beef stock or something else, vegetable stock that you make your stew with. So there are different kind of bases, I think is what Anne has called them. Hi, Jimmy. I hope that Amy steered you right. So there's like a dark base that they use for darker colors. Let me just fix that one. So the base is the first part. Then the pigments are the next part. And there's going to be a certain recipe of, let's look at this blue. So this blue is going to have a certain recipe of blue pigment, and it's a light blue, so there's probably white pigment in there. And sometimes it's like you can't always tell what else is in there. It's possible there might be just a tiny smidge of a red pigment to make it a cooler blue or something like that. So you'll have a ratio of the pigments to be able to reproduce each color. So if you think about that, there's a lot of places where stuff can go wrong. If you have the right ratio of ingredients, that was just called example, but the wrong stock, the color's not going to look right. If you have the wrong ratio of ingredients, the color's not going to look right. So anytime there's a mistake in the batch, instead of just throwing the paint out, Reaper turns it into samples and adds them randomly to orders. So that's why it's not really, you can't go there, buy that color again. I mean, maybe occasionally it's testing, but it's someone in the paint department goofed up, or they've got someone new who's kind of learning how to do it. And it's just the color that it is. So that's kind of, they're a boon. That's not a metallic, is it? Oh, that one actually is a metallic. It's a boon, but also, you know, it can be a little sad because if you fall in love with something. So the audio is not in sync again. I thought we had that figured out from last time because it didn't change any settings. So let me go to this view. If Justin's there, he can take a look and tell me if there's something he wants me to do. But I'll switch to just the document camera so you don't have to get disturbed by seeing the lack of sync. So that's kind of what the samples are. Now these ones, I can tell there's another label underneath. So it may have been the wrong color, went through the label machine and got the wrong name on it. So there's a mismatch between the name and the color. Maybe it's things that weren't selling well. I mean, if I really wanted to, I could try to peel that off and find out, but I'd rather keep the labels looking nice, so I'm not gonna do that. So that's samples. Does anyone have any other questions about samples? Or I guess even if you just have like a little general question about how they make paint. I can't go into like the whole thing. I don't know the whole thing. I mean, I genuinely don't know Reaper's proprietary secrets. I've just studied paint making a little bit in general because of my interest in other kinds of painting. So I do know a little bit about pigment and binder and stuff like that. Additives. So the additives are the stuff that they put in the stock mix. That's kind of like your spices and whatnot for your stew. So that's like if they're slow dry, something to make the paint take less time to dry, or take longer to dry, which Reaper doesn't put that in the paint, I don't think. But they do put matte medium or matting agent in so that the paints look less shiny. And they put a little bit of flow improver in all the paints. Huh, that's interesting. There are some colors that, there's something called drying shift, which is one reason to do swatches, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I haven't found Reaper paints to be particularly subject to it, so I'm not surprised you just had one that did that. But it is a thing that happens with paint colors. Okay, but let's get to some exciting colors you could buy. Oh, he sent some text. Oh, you think the changes didn't take? Okay, you're gonna have to tell me what they are again, Justin. Let me try going in here. No, it still says 250 milliseconds sync offset. So I think they did save. Do I just need to change the number? Also, we just learned that maybe you don't put your phone down on your swatches. There's a hot tip for you. Luckily, I have a phone case. I'm going to move the swatches for now. We're done with that one for now anyway. I will bring that back when it's drier because paint does look different when it's dry. So I will keep the phone here in view and see if Justin has any more suggestions to try later. I'm sure you could put your... Oh, try undoing it and see if it fixes it back. Okay. All right, let's go to me talking. And it doesn't look 100% synced on my end. So I suspect it does not on your end. So I'll go back to the other view maybe. And let's see, I actually made a run sheet because, you know, Reaper Live is so professional. I thought I should do things the same way they do. But also because I'm very forgetful and I know I forgot things last time. So let's see, I did explain samples. I'm going to circle back to the other thing because you listening to me talk is not input that same value again. All right. And now we test again. I think it's a little better. Hopefully you guys can't hear the construction either. We've got construction happening near my house and there's a very weird beeping machine today. But add 100. Okay. Does that look better? I think it's closer. But I don't know if it's still weird enough to trouble people. Keep adding until it sinks. Okay. Trying again. I mean, I hope the number... Is it doing anything? Is the number changing things? I don't know. It didn't have a save or anything. It just has a close button. But it is maintaining the number every time I change it. Okay. I think it's still a little off. I'm up to 550 now. So, you want me to throw some more numbers on? I'll throw some more numbers on there. I guess also let us know if the volume sounds good, because I've had problems with that in the past. I'm a little closer to the mic right now. Oh gosh, I'm actually way... Okay. Did that make it worse? Because it was up to 5,500. I accidentally pressed different buttons. It looks pretty close now. It's not spot on. It seems weird that I can see it too. So we're in sync? Okay. All right, then I will do the thing I wanted to do on Facecam. First of all, showing off some cool Brinewind shirt. I'll turn my light off so you can see a little better. Drunken Mermaid, yay. So what's it at number-wise? It is at 750, I think, but I'm going to double check for you. 700. So what I forgot to do last time was some thank yous. So first of all, thank you to Gene for my little bird, the bird with a brush. He did the cool art for that. And there should be another one on here that Justin gave me. And then if you haven't watched Mayor of Easttown, that turns out to be a very bingeable show. So I'm not even normally like a binge watcher, and we just got totally sucked in last night, and then I forgot all about fixing my screens. No, it's Gene. Sorry, Bryce. It's Gene Van Horn did my art. Actually like 10 years ago, and then I'm a very distractible person who never did anything with it. And then Ron helped me out. If you saw the Starting Soon graphic, Ron helped me out with that, and I'm hoping he'll help me out with another couple or give me the file so I can see if I can do it myself. And then, let's see. I think Dave made the one that I haven't put on screen. So we'll try to thank him again for that once I actually get it on screen. And then last show, I'm not the best at multitasking, so I'm trying to keep up with the chat and see what everybody's doing. But I missed a few things, and a couple of things I missed were Casmania 7 subbed during the show, and the Calisandra. And I want to thank you both very much for doing that. I mean, especially on the first time you ever see a show, that's very kind of you, and I really appreciate that. So I'm going to get back to swatching some colors, and then I'll take a little break and talk about, you know, what are swatches, why should you do swatches, what are some materials you can use to do swatches, just the wonder of swatching, I guess. Oh yes, Christine did do this Drunken Mermaid, and she made an awesome miniature. Let's pause and look at that for a minute. I'm gonna put my light back on so we can see it. Check out the Drunken Mermaid in 3D. That is so cool. And then she's got an arm holding a mug. Because how else did she get drunk, right? So that is very cool. And I'm sure it's in one of the ReaperCon boxes. And I can't tell you which one. I meant to look that up and then I did. Because what I did do is, you're not going to see me shake my paints a lot on stream because I want you to have to listen to that. But I shook them a lot and I checked most of them, even for if they were going to ooze, because sometimes when they just get shipped, there's a problem with that. So hopefully there won't be any of that on stream. So I will start with the Dungeon Dwellers Adventure set, which is in the Brinewind box. I'm just going to actually move this back a little so that I can get this in a better view for you guys. If I zoom in too much, it's going to be hard to make sure I keep it in the right area, but I will make sure that I raise it up so you can see the colors a little better. And I did put this back on, yes. Okay, so let's see what I need. I need Basilisk Green. I'm going to put the numbers on this before I scan it. So after I finish this, the video color is pretty good. But I find, like, and I mean anybody's video, not just mine, that it's rarely exactly the same or even as good as a photo. I have found that my scanner is pretty true to color. So I'm going to, after I finish painting all these and it dries, I'm going to put it on my scanner and take scans and put it on my blog, which is at the address over there somewhere. I'll probably put it on my Facebook page and Instagram too, but we'll see. So I'm starting off with the color straight out of the bottle. And I want to make sure we do get to see some of that. But then at a certain point, I'm going to rinse my brush out. And I don't want too much water in there, but I'm going to bring it down so that I can see what it looks like thinned out. And that's so I can get an idea of how does this paint work for, you know, if I was going to use it as the base coat of an area, and how does it work if I'm going to thin it down for washes or glazes. I'm going to talk about all the paper and all the things that you can use to do your own swatches as kind of a little talky segment in a minute. So I promise I'll get to the paper. The quick answer is this is watercolor paper because it's heavy, but there are lots of different options. This is definitely not the only one. All right, Rogue Shadow, I think, is one I don't have. So we'll go on to Hobgoblin Blue. Also, if I really wanted to make these neat and fancy, I could put them on a palette and then make sure that I'm dispensing only the correct amount of paint and all that kind of stuff. There are certain tasks, it's like, in my imagination, I'd love to be, you know, fancy and Instagrammable. But in the real world, I find it better to just do the thing. It's better to do it in a way where you're actually going to do it than to set this expectation of I have this swatch plan and it's this enormous task and then never complete that. So it's better to find the way you're going to do it. Oh, and I put that in the wrong place, but we'll just swap the names for those. Griffin Golden. Actually, it's Griffin Golden Brown, but I didn't have enough space to write that on my paper, and I'll try to get better about putting them where they're supposed to be. That looks like a great useful color. I kind of find that there's just never enough brown. Like, there are so many brown things and so many variations of brown that I hardly ever complain about having more brown. Yeah, I'll have to see if I have whiteout or something to fix that. This one is Torchlight, which looks like a very nice kind of light, lemony, not too saturated yellow, but it's got some good yellow to it. It's not, you know, an off-white. It's definitely a yellow color. I didn't comment a lot on the Hobgoblin Blue. Blue is like not my favorite color. I do use it, and I think I would use that one because it's saturated, but it's not like crazy in your face. Some of the phthalo type blues are a bit too much for me for everyday use, which I know a lot of people love phthalo, so that's nothing against phthalo. That's just the other one is not my personal favorite. This one I'm gonna guess is a metallic, and I'm also gonna guess it's kind of like a paint color that I loved in the old Pro Paints that I do not currently recall the name of, but it was a cool color. So we'll definitely have to look at this one again once they dry and we get the full shimmery effect in action. But that's a pretty, you could use that as a copper. That's a nice color. Metallics get thick on the edges sometimes when you do this the sloppy way instead of putting paints out on the palette. All right, and then there's another set of 6 called Grave and Gloom that's in the hobby box. I guess that's the main one they're still working on. The Forge Glow is just a little pinkish, yeah. You can kind of see where I thinned the paint out. You can get more of the pink tones, and that's part of the reason I do the thinning, is because it lets you see, they call it the undertone paint people. That's who I mean by they, I guess. And that's why I like to do that, because even if you look at this is Hobgoblin Blue, not Rope Shadow. If you look at that, it doesn't, where it's starting to dry especially, it doesn't look like that powerful of a blue. Like, it looks kind of dull, but it's not. It's a richer color than it looks. And the same is even true of this Basilisk Green. And that's good to know. These would both be good glazing colors, because that's, you tend to want a more intense color when you're really thinning paint down to tweak colors and stuff. So this is Grave Gloom, which is the only color that I have from the Grave and Gloom set, although it sounds very promising. And despite my checking the ooze, it's still a little bit of ooze. This is the kind of green that I love. This kind of sagey, celery type green. So I'm happy to see this one. And I'm sure that some ranger or similar character will end up with some of that on their outfit. And then you see this one, by comparison, the undertone didn't change very much. It's just a paler color of the mass tone. All right, let me check on chat. Yes, static display. You always need more of another color. I mean, I guess there are enough reds for me. I guess I have enough reds now that my eye just doesn't distinguish the difference in a lot of the reds. Well, I'm sure you can paint Grave Gloom to look gloomy. I mean, that's a nice lichen, moss. I'd use it more as a highlight. I'd probably start with something a little darker, like the Gutter Grime from the last box. Are hobgoblins blue? I guess Ron is the person who knows that, and he named the paints, so I'm guessing traditional hobgoblins are blue. So let me check my run sheet and see where I am. Okay, so other paints that I don't have, and that I don't remember if they've mentioned these on all, I haven't been keeping up on all the shows, I don't think. So there's also going to be a trio of paints in the VIP bag that you can get on site. So all the things that I'm showing you today are in the pre-order boxes that you can go on reapermini.com right now and order. And then if there's stuff left after the con, they'll sell it, but they would really prefer that you pre-order so they know how much to make. But then the VIP stuff is some stuff you can get at the actual convention. So it's like a box, and I'm sure it has miniatures and stuff in it too. It usually has like super cool miniatures that are very limited. That ends up being the most limited stuff that Reaper makes, I think, is the VIP stuff for the Reaper cons. But they're going to get 3 paints: Dragon Folk Scale, Hellborn Flesh, and Wild Folk Flesh, which is not easy to say. So I don't have those, and I don't know what color they are, but I am intrigued to find out. So I'll have to think about whether I want to get a VIP box or twist Ron's arm to send me some more paint when it gets ready. All right, so now let's answer some of your questions about swatching. I'm going to put this aside because we saw what happened when I messed around with what swatches on the desk before. So what are swatches and why do you do them? I'm actually going to start with a watercolor kit to show you. Maybe I'll zoom out just a little. So these are the paints, and you cannot tell what colors those are when they're dry. So you swatch them out so you have some ideas. So the kind of the foundation point of swatches, and the lighter colors are a little easier to tell, but still there's a difference between what that pink looks like and what that pink looks like between when you paint it out and in the little pan. So our acrylic paints are truer to color, but somebody was talking about how they had a color. I think Valander was saying he had a color, and when he started using it, he realized it was, I won't pick up a metallic, it was different than he thought. And that's called drying shift. So that happens a lot with watercolor paints. It can happen with acrylic paints, but it doesn't seem to happen as much with miniature paints that I've noticed. But what drying shift is if I painted this color out and it dries a little darker or a little lighter than what it looked like when the paint was wet. Even without much drying shift, because wet paint is shiny, it's going to look different to you than it looks when it's dry. So that's the other value of swatches. Because this one's still a little bit wet. So the wet paint looks different than the dry paint ones. So that's another reason to do swatches. It's basically the same reason you go to the hardware store and you get swatch colors for your wall paints, so you know what color it is. So we're kind of, because this is the actual paint that they paint out onto paper so that you can see what it really looks like. And that's kind of what we're talking about doing, just our own version for artist reasons. So that's kind of the point of swatching, but you can get more information than just this is the color. So depending on how you choose to do the swatches, you will get more information. So I was already doing that a little bit. When I'm thinning them out, I'm getting to see both what they look like straight out of the bottle and what they look like if you thin them down for a wash or a glaze. So that's useful information right there. And let me see. Oh, I have another example somewhere. So another piece of information you might want is how opaque is your paint. So if you put a black marker line down under the on the paper before you do the swatches, you can start to see the opacity. So you can see that this yellow, not unexpectedly because it's yellow, is more transparent than this brown or even this brown, which is kind of in the middle. That's a mixed color. That brown's kind of in the middle too. So the more you see the black line underneath the swatch of paint, the more transparent that paint is. That gives you information. That makes it better for glazes and possibly washes. But it also means you're going to have to do more coats when you paint your base coat, and more coats if you're doing something like wet blending. So that's a super useful piece of information, particularly if you have a lot of paint. So that's something to consider if you want to do some swatches of your colors. Think about whether that is useful enough to you that you want to find a way to include that in your swatches. You can also take notes. I mean, you could just write an O on this. I took all my markers away. You just write an O on this with a marker, and then you know it was opaque, or you could write SO is semi-opaque and T for transparent. If you buy paints at the art store, sometimes they put that kind of information on them. So some swatching options. This paper, this is the same paper that I was swatching on earlier, is a watercolor paper. It's not a great watercolor paper. I actually do not like to use it for painting watercolor paintings. But the important thing about it, or one of the important things about it, is this. So it says 150 pounds or 300 grams. And those are actually a different way of measuring paper, but I'm not even remotely going to get into that. So that makes it thick. When you look at this piece of paper, it doesn't even bend the way computer paper would. And I don't have a piece of computer. I have some notebook paper. So this is just notebook paper. And you see that's much thinner. Why does that matter? It may or may not matter to you. The main reason it matters is because you're going to get what they call buckling if you use thinner paper or paper that isn't prepared for water. So the other thing about watercolor paper is that it is sized. It's made, they know you're going to put watery paint on it, so they put the substance in it that helps it handle that better. So if you look at this from the side, this one that I've done a lot of with like different little swatches on, you can see ripples and bumps and dips in the paper. That's because I was using wet paint. This is just index paper. So it works. I mean, it's not like the paint bleeds through or causes any other problem. It doesn't even make the paper pill. I've used this, these kinds of index cards for ages. It's just, does that buckling bother you? It may or may not. The Shadow Raven, yes, Golden Paints is great because they have a hand-painted sample on every label. So when you buy a golden paint, and I happen to have one in arm's reach, that is the exact color it really is. And they put those 3 black lines under it so you can get that information about opacity and transparency that I was mentioning. So this, you can see that in my lifetime I have had previous swatching attempts. So this was one where I did circles. And then I did more index card ones. So my idea with these was to paint so I primed the index card with spray primer gray. I thought I had just a blank one, but I don't. It ended up, this is not a great way to do that because I covered it all up. So I'm not really comparing the paint color. And then I also apparently forgot to write in the paint names. But you can see that using the gray helped give me some of that information on transparency and opacity. So I can see that these two are more opaque than this middle one. And I'm going to talk about color of the paper again a little bit in a minute, but I'm just going to go back. This was another attempt to do swatches, and I did a bunch. So these are probably, you know, the first 54 Reaper paints that were released way back in the day. So some of these may even be, yeah, these are paints that aren't out anymore, to my dismay. I like those grays. So I went on for a while, but clearly my ambition exceeded my attention span, and I didn't finish that up. So you can do them in a book. I mean, this comes as a notebook, so you can keep the pages in the notebook. It also comes as a pad. One thing that I might, like in my dreams, I'd like to either cut these out or have small pieces of paper so that they're individual pieces of paper. So you can take them and kind of mix and match and test color schemes. So you can see, oh, does this color look good with this other color? I'm actually currently testing painting on clear plastic. And it's individual pieces of clear plastic, but I did not bring those with me. So to go back to some other paper options, you can, this paper, these are the Pathfinder paints, I think, that I swatched out when they came out. Yes, the 9.4s. And I have more of them. Did I do it twice? I don't know why I cut this piece of paper off, but there's some more of the Pathfinder paints, which there are some lovely colors in the Pathfinder paints. Those, oh, these are Reaper paints, but I was testing something else, so it's not really like organized swatches. And this paper is pretty inexpensive and it's very easy to find. So this is, instead of being the watercolor paper, this is drawing paper. But you can see it's still a little heavier. So my computer paper that I get, we get pretty cheap computer paper, is 20 pound. And this is 80 pound. So it handles the water pretty well. Otter Mama mentioned mixed media paper, and that's also a good paper. It'll tend to be a little lighter than watercolor paper. It's often 98 pound or 100 pounds, something like that. But it is also intended to be used with water media, like acrylic paints, watercolor paints, inks, stuff like that. So, but this paper, let's get you a side view. There's like a little bit of buckling on this one that I went on both pages. But for the actual, just the swatches, it handled it pretty well. I think that's 2 pages. So there's not a lot of buckling. So this paper would be fine. The one thing that I don't love about this paper, and maybe the Canson brand would be a little bit different. So this is Strathmore's drawing paper, and this comes in a variety of sizes. I think they are all the top ring notebooks though. But if you look at the paper, it's a little yellowy. It's a little more of an ivory than a white, which is not a huge thing, but if the point of your exercise is you're looking at colors, even this, I don't know if it's like what they call a bright white. Just since I was scanning them and sharing them with people, I thought it was better to switch over to doing the swatches on a white paper, so people were judging color in my scans as accurately as possible. So those are a couple of options. Let's see what else I had. So when I was talking about, you know, it'd be cool to do it individually, they sell these things called artist trading cards. And the idea is you paint a little piece of art on there and you trade it with your friends. But there, you know, if that's, you could have a swatch of color and then make notes as you use it. The fewer paints you use, the more effort to put into your swatches in a way, because you're using just a small number of paints. You want as much information about those paints as you can have. If you have, we did a count of my paints so I could buy shelf units for them, and I don't know. We're in the hundreds. It's 500, 600. My husband probably knows, and I'm just blocking it from my mind, so I don't think about it too much. But I like to have lots of colors. This is another brand of watercolor paint. Notebook. What do they call it? I have another one of that brand, because they make it so you can rip the cover, like the store covers off, and then paint whatever you want on there. But this is super cheap stuff. I mean, super cheap in the context, it's not as cheap as buying copier paper, but it's cheap for art paper. And again, I don't love it for watercolors, but it works for that. You can get these drawing pads pretty small. So they come bigger and they come smaller. So those are some options there. I have some bigger options. Well, some slightly different options for a different thing you can test about swatches. And I'm actually going to just stand up really briefly. This chair sinks sometimes, and I would like to not be sitting on the floor. So I'm just going to raise my chair. Just gets boogery about that sometimes. All right, so other bigger or different options. So the color matters, and I'll show you that first on here. All right, so this is Ultramarine Blue, which I have out because it's one of the Kickstarter colors. I'll just move these for a second while we're looking at that. And it's one of the ones that comes with a white cap. And I cannot remember now if Reaper has switched over to it's all white caps or if there's still some black caps. But many of us have black caps from the paints that use those. So I'm going to do a simple test of this, and then we'll do a more complex test. So first off, here's the first way. The most basic, minimal thing you can do to swatch your paints is what I just did. You put a little drop into that depression on the dropper tip, and because that's a depression, it's like a little bowl. It's rare for that to come off. There's a few colors I've had that chip off, and I have to replace it now and then. But it doesn't, even if you're handling it, it doesn't have a lot of problems with it. And I'll show you some other variations of this while we wait for this blue to dry. It is pretty thick, so it might take a minute to dry. I'm going to take some off in hopes that it will dry faster. So that you can see your perception of the color. It feels like a dark color on this one, and it feels like a light color on this one, because the color that is around the other colors you pick, your perception of a color is deeply affected by the other colors that are near it, which is one reason to take swatches and put them side by side and see, okay, do these colors go together? Do I have a nice, contrast and value range and stuff like that? But it's also why I will sometimes swatch things out on paper or even on miniature, because even having done this or having done the paper swatches, I can't always tell until I get stuff kind of in the situation I'm going to be using it in. So we'll continue to let that dry. When I have paints that are like the paint pots, I'll just paint a little bit on the top, and this is more likely to rub off and need to get replaced, but that's okay. Then these were washes, and the problem with the washes is they're going to be watery, so just like watery paint doesn't stick well to bones, watery paint may not have stuck to just the bare plastic of these caps. So what I did was I painted on primer and then put the wash on top of it. So, and it worked especially well with the textured ridge caps. So it gave me an idea of the washes. But that is a way, if you want to keep your swatching kind of self-contained, you could do that. You could paint some primer, some white or whatever color primer you want, I guess, really, on the sides of your caps, and then thin the paint inside down to wash consistency and paint it over that. And that would give you both the mass tone, the paint straight out of the bottle, and the undertone on your same cap. And then this one is probably dry because these GW pots are terrible. Nope, it's not. To my surprise. So I'll continue to let that dry. But you can do this with paper too. So you can do the thing, on the black marker, so at least they do transparency, but they make paper in all kinds of different colors. So they make paper in gray. There's kind of a brown. This is tone paper as well. And we'll just keep using ultramarine, I guess. It's a pretty handy foundational color. Oh, and I'm doing it off screen because I moved that in. So that's what the ultramarine looks like on the gray. Visual Journal, that is the brand I couldn't remember before. So Visual Journal makes both a watercolor paper that's 140 pound and is terrible for watercolor. Let's just be clear about that. And then this is actually 100% cotton paper, which is what is good for watercolor painting. That's what makes the difference. So I will actually use this for watercolor painting, even though it's only 90 pound. So I suspect this would be fine for, see, I've used some watery, I literally dripped water on there to make it's water soluble ink, and it didn't really buckle. That doesn't have water on it. That has water on it. So these are watercolor pencils, and so then I had to add water, and it didn't buckle. So this paper, despite being lower weight, is actually really good, I think. Those are both watercolors. Actually, everything on there is watercolor. Yeah, so I would recommend this paper. And we'll go to the back. I always do like weird swatch paint experiments on the back of my paper. And I'll get you an example on white with the Ultramarine Blue. I'm going to talk about bottles in just a minute because I really only just started to think about that, shall we? Apart from the things. So it's the same color, but you perceive it slightly differently on the different colors of paper. And then, so that tone tan paper, I don't even know if it now comes, this is a much bigger pad. This is a like 9x12 or something, I think. It now comes in a heavier version as well. So this is tan. I don't think I bought it in gray. So this gray paper is Strathmore's toned gray, and then this is Strathmore's toned tan, and it comes in like regular drawing paper and mixed media paper. Paper is a whole world of crazy in the art store. But the Strathmore brand and the Canson brand that I showed you, you can get those in Michael and Joann's often. You can't get all of the ones necessarily that I've shown you, although probably you can. But so you'll be able to get them with a coupon is part of the reason I wanted you to know that. So I don't know, painting it on the tan is probably not going to be much different than the gray because it's just a mid-value thing, so I'm not going to bother with that one. But this is black paper, which I also think they're starting to make black paper in watercolor and mixed media and stuff like that. I don't have any, but I have this. So I will do a quick swatch with that ultramarine. I don't think I have any test pages either because I haven't used the black as much. I'll do a quick test with the blue, and then we'll be able to see it on 3 different surfaces. If you now hear a dishwasher, it's because my cat barged open the door. So you're also probably going to hear a cat. You may see a cat even. Okay, so now we have gray, white, and black. And that same color, you might perceive it a little bit differently. I mean, you can tell it's the same color, but you probably had that happen where you start you like to prime in white or you like to prime in black, and you pick out a color and you think it's kind of a dark color, it's kind of a light color, or whatever you think it is, and then you put it on your primer, especially if it's like the first paint that you're putting on that primer, and you're like, oh wow, this is so much lighter or so much darker than I thought it was. And that's because your primer color is affecting your perception. Oh, she didn't stay. She will come and poke me, and then I will pick her up and you'll get to enjoy the kitty. But she does not like closed doors, so she came and had opinions about that. So does that kind of make sense with the swatches? I don't have like a magic answer for you for how do you get all three colors. My tendency is to, I like to prime gray, and I'd probably, you know, in my dream world, swatch gray, because it's kind of in the middle. Oh, see, Valander has a nice idea in chat. So what he said is, I made a swatch form with 14 sections per page, a square with a black block in the middle, and lines to the side to write the paint name and SKU on. I got them printed at Kinko's on heavy cardstock, and they work beautifully. You could also use Sharpie. So if you wanted to do an at-home version of what Valander's talking about, get a Sharpie and just color in a row with black. Sharpie's alcohol ink, and we're using water paint. So you can paint over... like, give it a second to dry. Well, more than a second, but give it a second to dry. So that's the two lids. So when I was getting ready for this, I was thinking about, well, we have paper. We have paper on the thing. And no, I have never really thought about this before. When I get a bottle of paint, the first thing I do is I write my name on it and I put the swatch on it. So I've done that for sure. But there's no reason you couldn't, I mean, as somebody, I think Shadow Raven was pointing out, this is, you've got black printed on this label. So we could thin paint, or not even thin it down, because we want to check this would require dispensing into a palette or handy blister pack. So we could do a stripe here and see how opaque that paint is. And then I can, you know, get just a little bit of water in my brush and kind of make a wash glaze and see what it looks like as a washer glaze. I maybe had too much water there. So the label's a little bit like magazine paper, I guess. A little bit of a glossy paper, it seems. So the paint is sticking all right. I don't know for sure if the thin paint, well, you could do that with brush on sealer, which is essentially paint medium, and it would work. We'll test this. I'll rub this after, I'll rub this with my finger after it dries, and we'll see if it stays or not. So I'll keep that in my view so I remember about it. But depending, so you may be the kind of person who is now cringing because I just ruined my nice, beautiful paint bottle, which honestly, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to ruin with my gloopy paint messes. And it did seem a little like, oh, do I really want to do this? But you have a very effective method for testing both the things that I was talking about right here on the bottom. So let's see. Otter Mama says, I do my swatching following how Vince Venturella tested different brands of paint on white with a bar of Sharpie and some lines with a ballpoint pen. I'm not sure what the ballpoint pen would do unless it's a different color. Valander says he's shared a JPEG of his swatch page in the hashtag toolbox section of the Reaper Discord. So if you like his idea and you want to get some like swatch things printed out and ready to go, because trust me, it took me a minute to make those little sheets because I was like measuring and trying to, you know, fit everything in. Here's the noisy cat. Ella. Ella, Sam, come here. Kitty. Okay, now you walk away. I was going to show you to everybody. Well, if you've watched Reaper Errant, she's the cat that shows up on Reaper Errant. Our other cat is much harder to pick up because he weighs, well, now he weighs 18.5 pounds because he's on a diet, but he weighed 19 pounds previously. All right, let's check my Ren sheet. So we talked about using black or black line for opacity. We talked about thinning out to see the undertone. We talked about types of paper. We talked about the unique discovery that the label of the bottle on our paints is paper. It may not, other brands may have more, you know, this looks shinier. I don't know, I feel weird putting the wrong color on here. I don't think I could do it. I don't think I put the wrong color on here. I'm gonna have to get some of this paint out too. Even though they are both blue. And that is so very not shaken. These poor P3 paints are the least maintained paints in the world. Well, at least in my world. So I will thin that down a little. So it probably wouldn't stay on the plastic. It's doing the same thing that happens with Bones Miniatures. But let's see if it, oh, it might stay. I don't actually want to cover the label. I'll do that. So it might stay on the label. So it's worth testing your other paint brands too if you want to do that on other brands' paint. But as the wash, but since washes are going to have a lot of water in them, you will need to use primer or something to make washes kind of stick. So we talked about the effect of color and why you might use different caps or paper. So I mentioned this, but I just want to reiterate it. Whatever method you pick, the most, like, your goal is swatches that are useful to you, that accomplish something for you, that you're learning about your paint or you're referencing your paint. So if something like this is too ambitious for you, work out a different thing. You're not trying to get on Pinterest with like your gorgeous swatches. You're trying to make something functional. Well, in theory, if the sample that I have has the new label, we can test it on here. I'll thin down the paint a little. Oh, it does seem a little glossier. Maybe I'm wrong about the caps. Nope, the caps are glossy too. But then I guess you have to decide whether, if I thin that down with, let's try that with brush on sealer though. So for the benefit of those watching the video later, since I think I was responding to something in chat without reading it out, which I'm very bad about doing, Valander pointed out that Reaper's changing the label system that they're using, or the labels themselves, not the system. So it is possible that the new labels won't accept paint the same way, and I'm pretty sure this is a new label, so I wanted to test. So this test is with mixing like a wash or glaze with water, and this is mixing with brush on sealer, which is essentially matte medium. So we will try to rub that off. This one is almost dry. I'm going to give it a minute. This is something, if you listen to me, you're probably going to hear this many times. To do a true test, I would need to try to let these sit for a full 24 hours or longer and then try abrading them, because acrylic paint actually takes at least 24 hours to cure completely. So it's touch dry in minutes, but it's it takes at least a day to fully cure. So if you can, if you're painting miniature you want to play within your games, if you can, paint it at least a day before the game. Or like, you know, 2 days before the game. So you finish it that day, you have a day, and then you have the game. Whatever, math is not really my strong area. Okay, let's get back to more swatches. But make sure I don't have random water here. And my run sheet tells me we're up to the Dark Reach and Swag Trio. So the Dark Reach and Swag are both in the one called Swag Box. So Dark Reach is like a fast palette set of 6, and Swag is a blister pack. And I actually got it as a blister pack. The other things I got in like snack baggies. I got that one in, this is what the blister pack will look like. So I don't have the boxes to show anyway. Or anything like that. Let's check on chat. In 2 months, there'll be plenty cured. And, you know, I'm not saying that I've never painted miniatures that I then used almost immediately, because I've certainly done that. But, okay, the camera's going to move just for a minute because I'm putting the paper under it a little bit. All right. Although maybe that doesn't work because I have to keep moving it. So never mind. Don't get dizzy and sick. Hold on. Let me make sure I always line these up because I don't want the OCD in the audience to get too upset. All right, Necromancer Purple. No, that's the set I don't have. This is Goggler Green. I do have Goggler Green. So that's Goggler Green. Oh, this looks like it might be a nice color to highlight with Gray Bloom as well. But let's find out when we thin it out a little more. Ooh, yeah, that's a nice deep khaki. I was hoping for one of those, so I'm happy to see that. Show it to you with a little less glare. And actually, the first set of colors is mostly dry, so let's take a quick look at those in their dried state. And now you can really appreciate the shimmer of Forge Glow compared to the matte of the. I mean, you can tell these are just still a little bit not dry, but they're matte enough to work for this, I think. Oh, and there's Grape Glue in its dried state. And I think the other ones I had were samples, so you can look at a dried white, which I still can't. I think it is a bit of a shimmer. I don't think it's like a super strong metallic, but I think there's a bit of a shimmer in that, and there's definitely a shimmer in that. Okay, so Drow Skin. Ooh, this looks very promising too. This looks like the kind of colors I was using on the Succubi figures. If you saw the Succubi figures that Jean sculpted for Bones 5 that I painted a while back. I used a lot of colors like this. Pinks and purples, but off ones, not completely true. Oh, this is a little bit different than what I was expecting, but this is the kind of color that's very handy for. So when I paint animals, I don't like to paint them like rainy gray and cloudy gray and true neutral grays. Like very little in nature is true black, white, or neutral gray. So I like to use colors like this color, or this might be nice for shading horns and bones and all kinds of things like that, where you don't want something that's as boring as a true neutral color, but you don't want like a ton of color. So you want a little bit of color, but not a ton of color. So this is Bethelian Mauve, and I love just about everything purple. So let's see, when I talked about waiting before using minis in game, am I putting a sillet over the paint? I'm new to painting and really nervous about putting varnish over the paint and messing them up. So honestly, I don't tend to use varnish a lot. If it's a game figure that I know is going to be handled heavily, I do. And that is the only time, really. And if I'm really concerned about it, I'll do what I call candy coating. So the thing about a varnish is it will change the appearance of your figure to one degree or another. If you use metallics and you use a matte sealer over your figure, you're going to take away some of the shine. Drows wasn't discontinued. I think it was Dark Skin was the one that was discontinued. So I thought the dark elf is still in production, and there was it would, if you're missing that color, I think this would be a good substitute for that color. I think that's going to slot in exactly where I would have used that color. So then conversely, if you use a gloss sealer to seal your miniature, then all your nice matte colors like these are going to start looking shiny. But the gloss sealer is more protective. I've researched this. I talked to Anne. Gloss sealer is more protective than matte sealer. So if I'm really worried about a miniature that's going to get handled in gameplay, I will gloss seal it and then use the best matte spray or matte put through an airbrush that I can find. So I use Testra's Dull Coat, which my understanding is become increasingly hard to find, and it's not available in some countries. And then, I look for matte or ultra matte sealers that I can shoot through the airbrush if I can't get the Testra's Dull Coat. Then if you really care, you can go back and paint the eyes with gloss or paint the metallics with gloss. But I usually just live with where I am at that point. If a mini is only going to be lightly handled, I don't like to use sealer at all if I can avoid it. It does. Sometimes it seems like it changes the colors or dulls the contrast or whatever, and maybe that's in my imagination. I don't know. But I also live someplace where spraying is, until I got more conversant with the airbrush and that became an option for me to spray, I had to wait for the 3 days of the year when, so this is Troglodyte Tan. when there wasn't just like a ridiculous amount of humidity. Today is a ridiculous amount of humidity day. Even though it's cool, I feel like I'm drowning. So sealer helps, but it's really just, when people call it clear coat, that is a very accurate statement. It's like putting clear paint over your thing. So I'm going to suggest you go to, I'm going to point this way. Nope, I'm so bad at this on the video. If you go to my site, Bird with a Brush, look for an article called How to Paint a Miniature That Will Survive the Apocalypse. And it gives you all of my tips for how to paint a really sturdy paint job on your miniature. And that starts with the metal. That starts here. And in my opinion, the steps you do here are more important than the sealer. So washing this miniature, using a good primer, if it's not on bones, putting your paint on and putting your figure on a holder so you're not touching a lot while you're painting it, letting it sit for 24 hours before playing with it. In my opinion, all of those things are more important to the sturdiness of your paint job than putting on sealer or the sealer that you use. So that's troglodyte tan. That looks pretty handy. That'd be great for like horns and teeth. I mean, you highlight white on top of it, but just to get that foundation. It might work with Golden Griffin. It's a little dull with Golden Griffin, but I think it might work. So that's a pretty useful color. Oh, and I didn't talk about how much I love Bethelian Mauve, and I really do, because just like I love those kinds of soft greens, I love those kinds of soft purples. And I meant to look it up before the show, but interestingly, Mauvine was one of the first kind of modern colors, like they called it a bat dye. And I guess that's where we get mauve from. So this is the dark reach shadows. Let's see. It looks kind of bluey. I suspect it's going to surprise us a little when we do the thinning out part. So this is one of the pokey tools. They've got a fancy new one that's gonna come out at ReaperCon. But if you don't have one of those, you can uncoil a paper clip and do the same thing. Hat pins. There's some kind of lab tool that's like a needle on a handle of wood, and I don't know what it's called, but someone had one at ReaperCon once, and it looked very handy because it had a nice long handle so that you wouldn't get paint on your fingers. Because that's, if you just use a T-pin, which also works. I mean, that's what the heart of this is a T-pin, and then they cast the pewter skull around it. So this color is a little thin because I think it's meant as a shading color. I thought Sadie said there was a liner in every box, so maybe this is a liner and it just didn't say that. I put a little more out to get the mass tone, but that's a nice shade color. This blue is a little more saturated than I would use to mix shadows. This is the kind of color that I like to mix shadows, and I put like too much paint there when I fix that, so I'm going to take some off. This is one of those ones you would really need to paint 2 or 3 nice smooth coats, which is not how I'm doing the swatches, so it's going to look a little bumpy, but that's okay. Let me check on the chat. Bob and Julie are liking the colors. I'm going to guess more Julie than Bob because, well, Bob can see color, he can't see value. It's a very interesting situation, but he has learned to paint despite that, which is pretty cool. Yeah, they do a good job making con colors that are interesting and fit in a useful way. So that's Dark Reach Shadow. And let's see. Jason says, for table games, we used to gloss sealer and matte over it. If the figures got shiny, it was time to revarnish. Yeah, that's the other nice thing about candy coating is you know when it's time to go fix it. And Jason's also pointing out that, yes, and most of the game miniatures I paint now are bones, and because they're lighter, that alone helps you avoid damage. So the sharp edges and just the heaviness of a metal miniature makes it so much more prone to damage than the bones. So in my experience, the main damage that my bones figures have suffered has been in storage or transportation. So they aren't getting scratched in gameplay. they're getting scratched because the foam I have is kind of scratchy and it catches on the weapons and then paint rubs off, or just the foam rubbing on it. I find if I kind of secure them in between like sheets of bubble wrap or tissue or something, like, so I don't even like have to wrap them individually, but just have like a sheet of bubble wrap or paper towels folded up and then put the bones on and then put another on top and then put more bones on. They get less damage and scratches and dings that way than in some of the figure cases I've tried. So thank you for pointing that out, Jason, because that is the other tip that I mentioned in that How to Paint Miniatures That Will Survive the Apocalypse, is the storage matters a lot. Oh, this is like a purpley gray pale metallic color. So we're definitely gonna have to return to this sheet when this dries, because that is gonna look cool. So you get those paints are in the swag box, but then there are 3 additional paints in the swag box that come in a blister. And I do have those. So let's see. I think Rusted Anchor is the first one. The paper's bumping it up against the camera is what my problem is. So as I get to the bottom of the page. So that's why it's going to be a little sideways now. So this is Rusted Anchor. And I see there's a question in chat, but I'm just going to finish swatching so my paint doesn't dry too much. And that does indeed look like a nice color for rust, but also if you like to do like a reddish brown style leather, which I find I often do, like that color would look really good on a character with green skin, like a goblin or an orc or something, because then you get that color contrast of red and green, but you don't, like, they're probably not wearing like, you know, super cool red that your heroes would wear. They're wearing more of an off red, and that's the kind of thing that is useful for. Let's see, Vanlitter asks, have you ever swatched a mix of colors, specifically the weird mixes like how phthalo, clear phthalo green, clear magenta equal purple? I have not. That's actually more called color charts instead of swatching, which seemed like kind of a topic of its own. So I've done it in the sense that if I'm working on a miniature, particularly if I want to use a limited palette, I will do test mixes of colors. And I do have some examples. I don't have all my examples of that here, but because I have this notebook, I have a few examples. So when I was, and I'm going to be smart and move the swatch thing out of the way this time. When I was working on the Learn to Paint kit, well, this is the Krampus. So I could only have 4 colors, I think, for the Krampus. So I played around with them. Okay, the pinks and purples are not the Krampus over on the side, but all these main colors are Krampus test mixes. So I was trying to pick my 4 colors to make sure I could get a nice range of colors with the Krampus. I also, we assumed that the painters would have black and white. So it was 4 colors plus black and white. But you can see, even though there's no green in the container, but there is like a blue and a yellow, you can get some really nice greens. But he was like a snow guy, so I didn't get to use any of those. But if you have those colors, it's nice for that. And then these are, well, these were tests for the colors to pick out for the, let's see if I can zoom out just a little. Tests to pick out for the colors of the Bones 5 Learn to Paint kits. So this was, I had 2 different blues and I was testing my red against them. That's what, so, you know, I started with a variety of which of these reds or blues or yellows would mix well, since you only get 12 colors. Then once I had those colors, this was more of the initial mixes, I think. Once I had those 12 colors, this was me during painting going, okay, well, I need kind of a khaki green. What can I mix like that out of my colors that I have? So this isn't a classic color chart in the sense that a classic color chart you would have, you know, say 10 paints down the top and 10 paints down the across the top. So 10 paints down the side, 10 paints across the top, and then squares. And where each of those meets, you would mix half and half. So if one of my 10 paints was the Ultramarine Blue and the other one was Torchlight Yellow, I would mix those together half and half and paint it into that square. And then I would know at least one option that those colors make when you mix them together. There are more complicated versions where you can add white or you can add black to see what it looks like when you kind of make a shadow out of it and what it looks like when you kind of make a highlight out of it. But that's the basic idea of a color chart. But even doing something like this kind of on the fly with the colors you have on the table in front of you that you're using, once you have a certain number of colors in play, it's always better to try to mix something out of those than, well, that's not always better. But your miniature is more likely to look harmonious. The color scheme on your miniature is more likely to look harmonious if you start mixing with the paints you have instead of going to get other colors. So I haven't done a ton of formal color charts, including with oil paints and watercolor paints, which I 100% should do. But I'm familiar with the theory of color charts. Oh, while we're talking about cool ReaperCon stuff. So this is the source book from last year. So this covers Brine Wind and some pirate crews, NPCs, cool areas that are in, you know, the city of Brine Wind itself. There are still a few of these on the webpage or on the store at reapermini.com. If the number I saw when I looked today is correct, I do mean a few. So hopefully there's more than what it said in case a number of you rush out and want to get this. What's being worked on for this year is a guide to the whole Savage Coast region. And it's possible that I've had some sneak peeks into that because I've been editing it. And there's some pretty cool stuff. So there's plants and animals and all kinds of amazing places with cool histories and little adventure hooks, and it's going to be super cool. So I just thought I would mention that, and that probably comes in the Brine Wind box, but that seems like another thing I should have checked for the stream. Shadow Raven, are you saying that the Brine Wind area needs more elves? There are certainly elves. There's sea elves. There's some stuff about sea elves in the new guide. So elf fans can look forward to that. All right, so, oh, I didn't do the whole swag trio. Let's get back to that. So we've got Brine Wind Brass, which I would be very shocked if it was not metallic. It would be a poorly named paint. There are land-dwelling elves that live in the area, but I don't recall reading a land-dwelling, like a specific land-dwelling elf communities that are unique to that region. And certainly some of the NPCs are elves. One of the big pirate captains is a dark elf, I think. So that's the Brine Wind Brass. And this, I'm excited about this one. I've been waiting to see this one since they mentioned it. Black Pearl. Black Pearl metallic. This is going to be fun. I mean, beauty is. Oh yeah, this is so pretty. Definitely want to thin it out a little so you can kind of see the colors within the metallics. I use waterproof ink for this, which I do recommend. So alcohol inks would work. So if you have, and now I'm totally blanking on the name of those pens that everybody uses for drawing manga and stuff like that. Micro something. This is India ink, which are pit pens. But if you have a pen, test, if you want to do something like this and you're concerned you're going to get paint over it, test it before you do the whole chart and everything. I had trouble. So we're going to have to let those dry to get the full effect, but that Black Pearl is a super nifty color. And you could use this, the burnished platinum would be a perfect highlight color. I mean, I'd mix a few steps going up, but these are very compatible colors. That will look great together. Okay, I'm just looking for a safe place to put my swatch. Where are we time-wise? So we still have a little bit of time, but that's okay because we still have a little bit of paint. Because I also have Kickstarter colors. Hold on, I have to fix my weird chair again. Sakura Microns, thank you. Yes, that's exactly what it is. So those are felt tip pens that you can buy that have a waterproof ink. Let me just get these guys back in their container. So the, we'll zoom out just for a sec. If you weren't familiar with the Kickstarter or you didn't pick this option, there were 2 sets of paints you could get. I can't remember for sure, but I feel like one set was called Anne's Favorites. So those were paints that were that are already available, that she picked out a set that she likes. And the Kickstarters always do this. They always have a set of paints that you're getting at a nice discount, but they're already available. Hi, the dog father. And then they also always add some new colors. So the way I wrote the chart, I kind of have to start with these because otherwise I'll have my hand going over paint. So I'm going to start with the Anne's Favorites. So these are colors that some of you may already have. And I'm interested to see because it's interesting how different painters' tastes can be. I use black and brown a lot, but looking at the rest of these, I don't really use a lot of these colors. A lot. I don't have a problem with them. I just don't end up... They're not my go-tos in the same way that clearly they're Anne's go-tos. We're going to have an interesting moment with Heraldic Red, but we'll get to that. Okay, so black and brown is... I do use it a lot. It's a great shadow color for a lot of red browns and brown browns and even yellow browns. It's, if I'm painting like a true brunette, like a person with very dark hair, I like to use this color and then shade down with walnut or brown liner, and then add, I can't remember what my current favorite, the color I used to use is out of print, it was sandy yellow, but there is a new replacement color, and I think it's Golden Glow, but I'm just zoning on the color that I like to use for the highlight. It will actually make kind of pinkish highlights, but I find it looks pretty realistic for that color hair. So that is a great utility color, and I totally agree with Anne about that. I mean, I'm not likely to disagree with her about anything. It's just different people have different kind of approaches to how they paint and what they like to paint. Then the Ultramarine Blue that we have already seen a bunch, so this is a good time to test. So this was the paint that was just watered down on the old style labels. And I got like a little bit of color on my finger, but it's not really coming off. And this is what we're pretty sure is the new style label. So this, I'll use a different finger so we can check the blue. This is thin just with water. And it's actually, once it's on there, it's staying pretty well. So that's interesting. And then this is thin with brush on sealer, which is medium. When I was talking about the stock of the stew, this is kind of like stock of the stew. And the one with that is staying fine too. So being able to swatch even thin down wash color paint on your bottles is a realistic goal. And even though you've now seen Ultramarine Blue on white, gray, and black, for the sake of thoroughness, we shall also put it in this swatch sheet. Something doesn't have a lid, but I guess I'll find it later what I did. Hello, Paul John's Life. So today I am, for the benefit of Paul John's Life and anyone else who's come in, I'm making swatches. Currently I'm on the Reaper Kickstarter 5 colors. So these are I think the level was called Anne's Favorites, but I might be misremembering what it was actually called. Previous in the stream, if you want to go back and watch the video on demand later, I swatched a number, though not all of the colors, from the Bones 5 swag boxes. Oh, it's possible that I picked out the wrong orange. I brought volcanic orange instead of lava orange. So maybe I'll go and grab that in a minute. But just to keep things moving, I will go on to the brilliant green. I probably don't use the orange a lot because bright orange and yellow are things that I seem to rarely end up painting unless I'm painting actual like fire. I don't know why. I don't love those colors, but I just don't. So. The earlier part of the stream has a lot more information on the paper, Shadowspawn the Assassin. So this is an artist paper. This is a cheap watercolor paper. But I discuss a lot of different alternatives that you can use. Over printer paper, I would suggest something like, if you want it to be really inexpensive, something like index card, because it's a little heavier. But you'll find even 80 or 90 pound artist paper, drawing paper, will buckle less than any kind of printer paper or index cards. But the paint doesn't go through, and it doesn't pill on most papers that I've tried. It's just whether it being all wavy bothers you. Like, this is an example of index card where it gets wavy. And a printer paper is going to do that even more, because this is a heavier paper than a printer paper. Okay, Monarch Purple. Hold on. Got a tower of paint falling down over here. Wow, miniature stand. Hello, 135 people. Okay, I guess I better explain what we're doing here. So I'm swatching out some colors. These are colors from the Reaper Bones Kickstarter. I've also been talking about why you do swatches, what kind of paper you can do swatches on. So we tried some experiments with, you can swatch directly on your bottle by adding color to the top or the bottle cap, but you can also paint full strength out of the bottle, or you can thin it down so you know what it looks like in a wash or a glaze. And if you go over, so in this case we went over the UPC code, and that black writing under there allows you to see how transparent or opaque a paint is. Let me grab one that's a little more, so this paint's probably a little more opaque. I must have something better. I think this one's pretty opaque. We'll try this. So I'll just do another test to give you an idea of, because you know, when you're painting and you're trying to get a surface colored, or you're trying to do wet blending, you want paint that's pretty opaque. When you're doing washes or glazes, you generally want paint that thins down well and often is a little more intense in color. So having some of that information available on your bottle or on a piece of paper is a useful thing. So that's an example of doing it with a more opaque paint. But I'm doing a similar thing on paper here when I put the paint down. So let's go to this Monarch Purple and do it. When I put the paint down on the paper, assuming it comes out of the bottle. So that's full strength out of the bottle. Art people call that the mass tone. So I'm going to pull that down a little and pick some of it up because I got too much. I'm going to have just a little bit of water on my brush. It's not like a big drop that's coming off. And then I'm going to pull the paint out so I can see what it looks like more transparently. So this tells me, you can see that this is a richer purple than it might look like at full strength. And that gives me an idea of how well it would work for a wash or a glaze. So hopefully that makes sense. Actually, we've got this one's going to be interesting, I think. Not that one. Noir Black is going to look a lot different just out of the bottle compared to what it's going to look like when we thin it down. So that looks like, it's, the name says it looks black. But let's find out if that stays true. I mean, I think it looks a little darker on stream, but it looks pretty black to me too. Oh no, I'm wrong. I was thinking of, there's a Reaper Black that's kind of, when you thin it out like this, it turns bright blue. This is not that one, but I do like that black a lot. That's a very pretty black. So I should have been listening to Anne and tried this a long time ago, because that's the kind of black I like. I do like Monarch Purple. For some reason, Imperial Purple is just kind of my go-to purple. Everyone I know picks a different. Nightmare Black. Thank you, Quindy. So Nightmare Black is one. It's going to look like this out of the bottle, and then you start thinning it down, and you're going to start seeing colors more like that. And it's like, that's why it's valuable to see what a paint looks like. Because if you're doing a wash on, you know, your drab old Necromancer, you probably want a wash that's going to be closer to that than something that's got a lot of vivid blue in it, like Nightmare Black. And yes, Coal Black is almost teal, and that's what we like about it. So that's why it's useful to test, or to do something like this. So at a quick glance, you know what your paints do. Now, okay, so now Heraldic Red. When I was going through before the stream, shaking my paints and stuff, I was like, I'm not hearing it. It's not shaking. And so even though I do maintain my paints, I am a year late on doing my main paints. I've done kind of like my stash paints, but I haven't done my main paints. And I used this paint. This was one of the colors I considered for the Learn to Paint Bones 5 kit. And then Ron suggested I use another color because it's already in a Bones 5 set. So I have no idea why, but this paint has like super thickened up. So you're going to get to see an example of thick paint. And I don't have all my tools around here to deal with that. So this, it's come out of the lid a little. You will sometimes find that even you'll get paint where the main bottle is fine. I'm just going to move this for safekeeping while we mess with this. So the main bottle sometimes is fine, and that's kind of what I was expecting to happen in this case. But you'll get like a big glop of paint has caught in here and started to dry. So this is one reason it's good to check your paints every now and then, because that can be happening. But this entire thing of paint has thickened up. And rather than have you guys deal with watching me fix that on stream, that's kind of like a topic for a separate day. I'm just going to pull out of here and thin it down as I need to make it work for the stream. So the Dogfather, if you want to watch the video on demand, I did like a 15-minute thing where I talked about options of paper. This particular paper is a watercolor paper. It's a cheap watercolor paper, Canson XL. But you can do this on a variety of papers. So you can do it on computer paper. It's just that it's going to warp a ton from using the water on it. The other kind of cheap, easy answer, these are index cards, and I've used these for doing paint tests and swatches for years. So if you want to watch the, once the stream finishes up, it's available on Twitch for 2 weeks. And then after that, Reaper's going to put it on their YouTube. If you want to watch and see an example of, I don't know, I don't think I showed a full dozen artist papers, but I showed at least 8, I think. Other options that you can look at, then you will be able to do that. So the problem with this Heraldic Red is not Reaper. This was fine when I tested it for the Bones 5. I'm really kind of mystified as to how this bottle of paint has dried up this much when like my other paints are all fine. So the opacity of this may not be exact because I haven't rinsed in water. I haven't restored it the way you should, which is I would mix water into the whole thing and stir it. Like I would stir it before I shake it. When it gets this goopy, you have to stir. Shaking isn't enough. So I get like a plastic swizzle stick or something from the grocery store and stir these. And in my attempts to clean up my desk to get ready for the stream, I took those away. So I can't really... Well, do I have one rack? I do, actually. So this is like the super quick version of how you would fix your paints. So I get these. There may be other tools that work fine as well. And I reuse them, so they'll get all kicked up with paint. Once it's dry, I reuse it. So I'll pull all the excess paint out of here with a brush or with one of these and put it back in here. Then I use distilled water because the water in my area has a lot of heavy metals and whatever cakes up your shower. I have a lot of that. So I go ahead and use distilled water. I put drops in there. I stir it with the stick, and then I have a vortex shaker that I use because I have weak hands. But you can certainly do it by hand too. And then you test it again. So that's one way you know. So I actually knew immediately just by picking it up because I don't know. I'm going to put this next to the mic. So you can't really hear anything. Compare it to this one. Hopefully you can hear some shaking. Try stirring it. So Suicide Prinny says, what if it seems too thinned out? I have a bottle of rich leather that seems like it's separated and won't mix together. So it's possible that it's been sitting long enough that the pigment has caked up in the bottom. So this somehow, it did dry out very evenly. It just got thicker and thicker. It didn't separate. Separation is certainly a common problem that happens with paint. So it may just be that your pigment is caked up at the bottom and just shaking it like I just did. This isn't gonna, that's not enough to, it's caking up at the bottom. You have to stir it. If it gets really, really old, where that turns into like a ball of goo, sometimes you can't recover that. But if you stir it and then shake it, and if you need to, if you stir it and it's kind of the consistency of this one, then you need to also add some water. But again, if you go on my site, which I'm going to do it the wrong way again. No, I'm doing it the right way. Look at that. If you go on my site, there's an article called How to Care for Your Miniature Paints or something. And it's got pictures and description, and it links to a video with the vortex mixer, so you can decide if you need one of those in your life. It has a lot more information about maintaining your paints. So that was the Heraldic Red, which again, do not judge the appearance of this paint against Reaper. This is on me for not maintaining my paints properly. All right, we did the Noir Black. Now is Lantern Yellow, which I think probably is a useful color, but it falls into that category of colors I don't love, so I just don't use it that much. I guess I need to just paint some stuff orange and yellow and get over it. I do sometimes do that. It's like, oh, I hardly ever paint this color, or I haven't painted that color in a long time. I should just, you know, grab those paints and make myself paint that color. I like to get into a rut, and I like to kind of be ready to go with most colors. And that looks like it's a good color for mixing because it's nice and saturated. That's the Lantern Yellow. So do you have a new dog now, Valander? You said somebody followed you home. But you said it's your neighbor's dog, so hopefully that is still your neighbor's dog. That is how I got a cat once, though. Another time we were able to resist the... It was clearly a well-fed and happy cat that was just looking to go inside and eat somebody else's food. The cat that became ours was scrawny and covered in fleas and not being taken care of, even if he did belong to somebody. So now he's our cat. And very much not scrawny. He did not like being scrawny, I guess. So this is Spectral Blue, which is a nice color. And I have used this color. It's just kind of a specific color. It's like it's going to come up. You know, when you need that kind of color, you need it. But you don't need it every time. Trying to get through these ones so that we can get to the new colors. Yes, for the benefit of those who just arrived or arrived recently, this is one of those colors. It looks kind of dull straight out of the bottle, but it is a punchy, powerful blue. So for the benefit of those who arrived more recently, in the Bones Kickstarters, there's always a set of 12 paints you can get that are kind of at a discounted price, but that are already released. So these ones were ones that Anne, the lady who developed the paint lines, picked out as colors that she particularly likes or finds useful. And then the next set that I'm going to look at are brand new colors. So this is Bleach Linen. And like Anne, I do prefer to use an off-white for most things. So I really rarely use true whites for anything other than like top highlights. The off-whites just, they don't take over as much in mixes and not as likely to get chalky. This isn't one of my preferred go-to ones, but it's certainly an effective one. I may have put it in the first Learn to Paint kit. I can't remember now. So this is Peachy Flesh. Mine's called Peachy Flesh, which I think is the new name for this. So it used to be called Youthful Flesh. There's a handful of skin colors in the Bones line that have changed their names. The numbers are the same. The colors are the same. The name is changed. It was felt that names relied on stereotypes that don't reflect how we should be looking at skin colors, so they changed the names. And I think it was a good thing that the names are changed, and I like the new names. I think I explained that very poorly, but you know what I mean. Okay, so those are the colors that we already had access to. Now let's look at some new stuff. Now some of these colors have been available previously. So Carnival Purple has been available previously. Bruce Purple has been available previously. This may be the third SKU number for Ashen Brown, which is a fantastic color, and I'm so happy that it's back. But I will talk. But then there's these. I'm dying to see these ones, and some of these are new, and some of these are like. So Carnival Purple was available in the past, but it was available in the past, and they're still Title 3s. Is that the? No, I think they're 9.6 when they're like special edition colors for cons. Varl B. Gem asks, I've always wondered why they changed the names of paint. Reaper very rarely changes the name of paint. So when I'm talking about the number change of Ashen Brown, it's been called Ashen Brown in every incarnation. So that color that they mix that way is always called Ashen Brown. It ends up having different numbers because of inventory stuff. So now it's in a different, it was in a line that got canceled, so it can't have a canceled line's number. So now it has a new number. The only other name changes I can think of is I think there was like a black green and a green black, and one of those got changed to something else eventually because that's confusing. Maybe a few other things like that, but they're pretty good about keeping the names. Oh wow. So I said I've solved all the goopy problems before we went on stream, but apparently this paint decided to be exciting. So this was, I'm going to say ReaperCon 2015, but I could be misremembering. This was one of the con colors. And it was a color that people fell in love with. It's just super useful for glazes. I think it's one of Michael Proctor's favorite colors. So yeah, if you see a paint with a unique name in the Reaper line, it should be a unique color. It may not be massively different. I mean, there's a black for Pathfinder and there's a black for regular Reaper, and they both have to be kind of basic black. But there should be some difference, and would never make, just rebottle the same color with the same exact name. Bruce Purple used to be in the regular line, I think. There was a triad with 3 different kind of off purples. There's like something grape, Bruce Purple, and another one. I like them all. But now this is a color, I did still have it. I think it came out as a special edition color too. And this was one of the colors that I used on the succubi skin I was mentioning. If you go to my blog, there's pictures of all the succubi, but I also wrote down the recipes of the skin colors. So I'm happy this is back because I used a bunch of out of production skin colors in the skin, and it was just one of those times when I try sometimes to pick colors that are in production so that people can replicate the paint jobs or, play around with the recipes and stuff if they want. But sometimes for the sake of expediency or my own sanity, I pick what is the best for what I want to do. And if Michael's still on, he knows the paint. We paint with out of production colors all the time. We're just super bad about that. So this is Ashen Brown, which is, I had been trying not to paint with it for a while because it was out of production. But what this color may not look like much. You'd be like, wow, super exciting. Love it. First of all, it's Volcano Brown is still around. It's a good highlight for that. But what is magical about this is if you paint like super pale people, like that's pretty pale, but even paler than that, this is a fantastic shade color for those. Because in my experience, I would often find when I'm painting very pale skin, you pick a shade color and it looks too red, or it looks too orange, or it looks too something because it's kind of saturated, and the pale skin color is so pale that it doesn't have enough color in it to fight that saturation. So your shadows end up standing out more than the midtones and the highlights. This is Oxide Yellow, one of the colors I'm very excited about. The other color, which is still in production because, you can't get these Kickstarter colors right this minute. If you want another color that does a similar thing, and it's a slightly different tone, so I like using them both, is Saddle Brown from the Bones line. And that is another color that is fantastic for using as a shade color on super pale skin. You might have to mix it with the skin, like you can't go straight from super pale skin to this. The value changes too much. Might work for a wash, I don't know. But those are kind of 2 of my secret weapons for dealing with painting super pale skin, which I do have trouble painting very pale. Like a lot of people seem to like their skin colors a lot paler than I do. I would prefer to start a little darker in value and then just use a lot of highlights than to start with like the lightest color paint if I'm painting a fair maiden or whatever. So it was called Ochre Yellow on the Kickstarter, but they changed the label to Oxide Yellow to kind of go with these other two, I think. And this is essentially, it is Ochre Yellow, or it's fairly similar to Ochre Yellow, which is a color I love in like traditional art media. So in my watercolor and oil colors and all those things, I always have Ochre Yellow. It's just very handy for mixing, for using for like kind of more natural things. Likewise, I think this Oxide Red is meant to be similar to an artist's version of Burnt Sienna, which is another super useful color. And both of these, if you mix them together and with a little white, you can get a whole bundle of skin tones right here. So most, if you're into like being a traditional oil painter or watercolor painter or whatever, you don't usually buy skin colors. You mix up the skin colors. And these are the kinds of colors. You can mix it with straight red, yellow, and blue. And then a lot of white, usually, or a bit of black, depending on the skin tone of the person. But these colors are just kind of easier to do it with than going from just, really saturated red, yellow, and blue. And this, likewise, is another color. I mean, straight out of the bottle, it would work as a skin color for some skin tones. And then you can mix it up with the other two in white and black and get a lot of skin tone variety. These will also obviously work for oxidized type thing, rust and wear and tear and stuff like that. They are very good for that as well. The Kickstarter is not still going on. This is their last Kickstarter from a few years ago. They're working on fulfillment soon. All of these colors are going to go into production at some point, though. So even if you weren't in the Kickstarter and you don't get them that way, you still have the opportunity to get them. And you also may want to keep an eye on kind of Reaper Media or Kickstarter, because the next Kickstarter they run, I virtually guarantee they'll do the same thing. There'll be a discount value pack of 12 existing colors, and there will be 12 brand new colors. That is not black indigo, that is rich. This is black indigo. The paint tends to be the thing I get the most excited about in the Kickstarters. I'm lying. Don't kill me, sculptors. I love your fine sculpts. I cannot pick favorites among the sculpts, because there's always too many cool ones to pick favorites. So this looks like a great mixing blue, because it's not too saturated. I love your fine sculpts. I just get weird about paint. And just to be clear for everyone, so I do have some of these paints because Reaper makes the paint in America down in Texas. I do not have my Kickstarter pledge or boxes or anything. So I don't, Ron wanted, he's like, I'll send you Kickstarter colors, but only if you make sure people know that you don't. I'm like, okay. So I was tasked with being clear that I have not fulfilled my stuff. I don't have any sneak previews. The people who won boxes on streams have seen more of the Kickstarter production models than I have. I think so. They sent me the figures for the Learn to Paint kit that's in it, because obviously I had to paint those. And I don't even think they were production models. I think they were, I forget what Ron calls the test ones. But that was Rich Indigo. I'm not sure I showed the bottom. Which I believe has been released in the past. And so has Black Indigo. But those figures that I painted for the Learn to Paint Bones 5 kit are the only Kickstarter miniatures that I have laid hands on. There were just so many cool sculpts in Bones 5. I mean, there's like big giant monsters, like Jason's sea giant, and then there's stuff like Julie's bus, which are super cool, and Bob did some amazing undead guys. There's just like, Jean did those succubi, which there are also incubi. I didn't get sent incubi, so I didn't get to paint those yet. But there are incubi, so it's an equal opportunity sex demon party. I do need to check my Discord messages. I'm so old. I'm really bad at Discord. I'm trying to set one up too, which is like, that's super fun. I'm trying to make my husband set one up, would be a more accurate statement there. Orchid Purple. So that's the Wild Violet. That's pretty neat. I like that. This is an interesting color. So it's pretty transparent, but I think you can probably get some nice glaze effects with that. It might be nice for like a lipstick, but just a little more on there. Oh, I think we'll have just enough time to look at the dried ones and then come back and hopefully these ones will be dried. Oh, trash. I couldn't even figure out how to look at my Discord right now. The laptop that I have to stream on is like a touch screen. So if I like touch the wrong thing, everything gets messed up. I thought forums were great. So I sort of don't understand the appeal of Discord where things go away instead of be something that you can link to and reference. I deeply enjoy linking and referencing things, so I like to just say something once and then it's kind of on the record, and the next 14 people that ask that question, I can just refer them to the previous time I answered it. So I think that, and then things aren't threaded the way a forum would be, or even like Facebook comments. So that's part of why I think I haven't jumped on to Discord with the same alacrity that a lot of people had, because I'm like, there was already something that did this and it did it in a way that I like better. So obviously forums don't have the feature where you can have voice chat and video things, and it's nice that it is all cross-platform like that. I see the appeal of that part, but that's kind of my mental problem with Discord. And then at this point, it's just there are so many things, and it's like, well, now it's another thing I have to check, because I have to check my messages on this and that and the other thing, and I'm always perpetually behind on my messages anyway. So this is going to dry, and we're going to look at the other dried ones. But before that, we're going to talk about next week. So I figure out what I did. So people seemed excited about the idea of I would go back and grab some of my old figures and do a little, if I got feedback from this at ReaperCon, and then I did the suggestions, what would it look like? So these were some figures that I pulled out that I might be able to do that with. So I don't think I can work on all of these in one stream. I could probably do I can do this as a stream more than once. I think this is something that people might enjoy as an ongoing thing. Let me just catch up here. Okay. Oh yes, it's bonk. So do you guys like that idea that next stream I'll grab a couple of these miniatures and kind of like give you, I'll go in judge mode and say, okay, here's some stuff I would tell you if you had submitted this figure into the Reaper Open. Here are some things that were great, and here are some things that you could improve. And then I bust out some paints and I try to do the improvements on screen. So you won't be able to do a side-by-side comparison, but I'll take pictures of these. And then after the stream, I'll take pictures of the repainted version, and I'd be able to share pictures so you can get a side-by-side after the stream. So there's one reason I want to use Bonk, but there are other reasons I want to use this guy, because I think I can do 2 for sure, but I don't know if I can do more than that. So I'm going to let you vote. So vote number 1 for the Goblin Archer and number 2 for Bonk the Bugbear, of which you would like to see me work on. So I'm going to do 1 monster and 1 person. So, so far Bonk's winning, but we'll check that in a minute. And then I had 3 human type people. So there's barmaid and a blacksmith. And he definitely is a little bland. So I think there's a lot to work with on it. There's not quite as much to work with on the barmaid as the other 2, I don't think. And then this is like a rogue type guy. So it looks like Bonk is getting, well, I don't know. I want to say humanoids, but they're also still humans. So I need the group noun for like the other type of people. It looks like Bonk is winning. So the goblin might, I will do this another time. He's still probably going to happen at some point because there's definitely a lot to talk about with contrast on this guy. This guy has fewer problems with contrast, but he has some other issues. So now we're going to do the three, townsfolk type people. So 1 for the barmaid, 2 for the blacksmith, and 3 for the rogue, town guard, whatever you want to call him. Well, this looks more evenly split. I may have to go back and count the votes in the chat. It looks like there are fewer votes for the barmaid. But we'll give chat a minute to continue to comment on that. So yeah, so if you want to come next week, I'll give you an idea of the kinds of things that the judges look at and the kinds of critiques you would get. And then when you get critique, you don't have to do this. You don't have to go back and repaint your miniature. A lot of people prefer just to take that information and put it into the next miniature. But I think it's interesting if you can compare the same. When people make comparisons, it's easier to do it as similarly as possible. So particularly once you get the pictures, you'll be able to do like kind of a before and after. And the changes may not be dramatic. But the other reason I want to do this is to show you. I used to be very afraid, like once the miniature was done and even if I did know what paint colors, because I write down what paint colors I use a lot of the time. I'm going to ask if one of you who is better at math could kind of give me a note of which one won. So Grey Wolf XR says the Smith is winning. So unless a lot of votes come in for the Thief, or we get, and I'll kind of keep him in reserve as if there's extra time, we'll do the Thief. So I used to be very afraid of going back and adjusting figures once I'd considered them done. Because how do you make sure the paint color is the same and stuff like that? And once I actually started doing it, it turned out to be much more accessible and much more useful than I thought it would be. So with all of these figures, I have no idea literally what color I painted these. Some of them, the ones with writing on the bottom, were practiced for speed paint, so I know it was only 12 colors, but I don't remember which 12 colors. So I'm just gonna like go and do kind of pull stuff off my shelf that's like, well, this kind of seems like it matches. So there probably won't be exact matches, and that will hopefully help you guys feel a little more adventurous about trying that yourself, that you can go back and mess with stuff and you're not necessarily going to mess it up. So let's see. Okay, so the blacksmith is our winner, and Bonk is our winner, and we'll keep these guys in reserve or for another time I do this. And I may have more of these lying around too, but I just thought these ones seemed like they demonstrated various things, and then we have a variety of kind of more classic townsfolk PC type characters and a more classic monster type character. All right, so now let's look at some paints. I mean, I don't know if anyone cares about the sample paint, but I'm going to zoom out and then I can just pull as I need to. So these were the sample paints. And I showed these because if you make orders in the near future, you may receive some of these paints. So why not share them with you? So this is the Dungeon Dwellers Adventure. It's a fast palette of 6 paints. This is actually Hobgoblin Blue, so ignore where it says Rogue Shadow. I did not receive Rogue Shadow. I believe it's a liner, so it's going to be a darker color. And you can see the Forge Glow, which has a little bit of a pinky undertone, is a metallic. So that's in the Brinewind box. If you're interested in any of these, you go to reapermini.com right now and you can pre-order them and you'll receive them before the con. I think. So they want to know numbers because some of this stuff they make in-house, but some of it they don't, and they have to order it. So they want to know numbers in advance of ReaperCon. So it may be that whatever they don't sell goes on sale at ReaperCon or through the web store after. But if you know you want this stuff, you kind of have to lock it down, I think is the deal. So Graven Gloom is in the hobby box, which they are still working on mixing a lot of these colors. So the one that I received is Grave Gloom, which is this cool green color. I mean, it's a cool green, but it's also cool. Then Dark Reach and the Swag Box Triad are both in the one called Swag Box. So we have Gobbler Green, which is a really nice dark khaki, and the line was light on those, so I'm very happy to see that. Drow Skin, that's a super cool purple, and again, it is cool and cool. I like cool purples as a rule. Troglodyte Tan, it's always useful to have more brown and tan. That's why I like Golden Griffin a lot. I need more brown in my life. Dark Reach Shadows is one of those dark colors that has a more intense color underneath, and there's also a metallic color in this one, which is Burnished Platinum. It's pretty cool. I like that color a lot. And it's going to be very nice to highlight Black Pearl, which is also in the same box, but it's in like a blister pack. So it will come like this, because mine actually came like this. There's a second metallic, which is Brine Wind Brass, because I guess you can't have pirates without a bunch of brass. And then Rusted Anchor, because you also can't have pirates without a bunch of rust. So those are some of the paints from the various Brine Wind Swag boxes. And then if you get the Mega Bundle, I think it's called, you get all of this. And then you get some extra stuff too. What you don't get, and what you're going to have to buy on site, is the VIP paints if you want them. So that's available as part of the VIP bundle, which has other stuff, and I do not know offhand what the other stuff is. But the paints are Dragonfolk Scale, Hellborn Flesh, and Wildfolk Flesh. So unfortunately, these aren't 100% dry, but for anyone who came in a little later, I'm going to, my scanner's pretty true to color, so I'm going to scan these, and I'll put them up on that website that you see at the top of your screen. I'll also probably put them on my Facebook page and Instagram. We'll see if my attention span holds and I do that. So let's look at some more colors. These are not part of the ReaperCon event. These were in Bones 5. So this set is currently available. So all of these paints are currently available. And if there's time right at the end, which I'm not sure there is, I could run and get Lava Orange, but just assume it's like a more red orange than that one. So these are kind of, Anne picked out 12 useful. She may have been trying to pick out ones that do kind of get overlooked too. If I recall correctly, that may have been partly where she was going with that. And then these are new colors, or the return of special edition colors. So some of these were previously available as ReaperCon colors or other limited events. So Carnival Purple, Bruised Purple, which I'm very happy to see back. For that's a great shade for a lot of it's a little bit off from standard human skin colors. Ashen Brown, which is a great shade for pale actual human colors, skin colors, but it works for other stuff too. And then we're all very excited in chat. I see a lot of people agreed with me that it's great to have an equivalent to Ochre Yellow, Burnt Sienna, and I'm guessing that one's like Burnt Umber or something like that. So, or is that one more Burnt Sienna? That one's more Burnt Sienna. Maybe it depends. Some Burnt Siennas are more red than the others. But they're called Oxide Yellow, Oxide Red, and Oxide Brown. So, and you can also use them for rust things. But if you want to mess around with mixing your own skin tones or customizing skin tones, these are the kinds of colors I would recommend using for stuff like that. And there are some colors that are kind of like this already in the line, but these are very useful additions. Then we have Black Indigo, Rich Indigo, Wild Violet, the very interesting Orchid Purple. Oh, yeah, Orchid Purple. Lotus Orange, and Leaf Bud Green. So those ones are still wet, so I'm going to put them up here. But I hope you enjoyed this adventure in swatching. I mean, I don't know if it's boring to just watch somebody paint on paper. It doesn't seem exciting, but lots of you seem to be into it, so I'm glad that I'm not the only swatch nerd in town. Thank you for watching. I didn't, if anyone subbed or did bits or anything in the chat, I missed it, and I'm so sorry for that, and I thank you. And if you didn't, that is fine too. I I should have the graphic, but I don't know if I'm going to attempt to summarize all of the Reaper shows. There's a bunch. There's stuff every day except Sunday, I think. So you can watch Ann paint at 11:30 a.m. Central every day. Then I'm on Monday in the afternoon. Crow's Nest with Michael and Jason is on Tuesday. Wednesday is... Oh, see, now I'm getting them mixed up. Wednesday is Miniatures Den, and Thursday is Crafty Creative, but I could be mixing that up. And then Friday is John and Dave talk about cool things and have fun in Reaperland. And Saturday, Sadie, the current mixer of all our gorgeous paint, who made these beautiful metallic colors for us. She invented these gorgeous metallic colors that I just love. And some other colors as well, of course, all the other Reapercon colors. She comes and paints and chats and hangs out and stuff on Saturdays. So thanks everyone for coming. And I should have a screen that I'm supposed to put up now, but I still need to fix that. So I believe that Justin is going to find somebody to raid, because, you know, we gotta support the community and keep having fun watching stuff. So I'm going to click the button. I think the little thing in chat says there's gonna be raid. I don't know. I see a white square, so who knows what's happening. But just gonna wave and say goodbye, and thanks for coming.